They say if you walk Blaine Creek near Fallsburg after midnight, the water don't just talk, it remembers. It remembers a night in 1896 when a young woman, cut and shaken, crawled out of the dark and begged for help. She told of a house on a low hill where the lamps never went out, and of brothers who kept the doors locked from the outside. Welcome to Kentucky Melody, where the past ain't never as dead as it pretends to be. Tonight, we're heading to Lawrence County, Fallsburg, where a farm stood just far enough off the road that screams could be mistaken for a fox cry. Folks still call it the Collinsworth place, and what they say happened there, well, it'll chill you clean through. Before Fallsburg folks whispered about chains rattling in cellars and screams hid in the floorboards, they whispered about the brothers themselves. William and Ray Collinsworth were raised hard in the Ozark Hills east of town. Their father was mean as a copperhead and plagued in the mind. When he died, it left William, steady but cold, to tend to his younger brother. Ray was the strange one. Neighbors said he grew worse with each season, slipping deeper into madness, spending days hiding from the sun, mimicking circus folk whenever the shows passed through Lawrence County. They lived on a lonely farm where the lamps burned long into the night and the chimney smoked at hours when no decent household stirred. Folks didn't visit, and by the fall of 1896, that farm would be tied to one of the most grotesque and terrifying tales in Kentucky lore. Now, the house is gone, but its name lives on through the Fallsburg Fearplex, a haunted attraction that pulls thousands each Halloween. Crowds walk through the staged nightmares built from the bones of the Collinsworth legend, but behind the theatrics lies a story darker, older, and far more real. It was a cold autumn night back in 1896 when the hills was already wearing their first coat of frost. Down by Blaine Creek, a miller was checking his sluice when he heard it, a scratching and scrabbling on the creek rocks, like something crawling up from the water itself. He raised his lantern high, the flame shivering in the wind, and what that light fell on near froze him in place. A young woman was dragging herself up from the shallows, clothes tore to near nothing but rags hanging off her shoulders, her feet raw and bleeding from the stones. Her hair clung in wet strings to a face white as chalk, eyes wide and wild like she'd seen hell itself and barely crawled out of it. She collapsed right there in the gravel, gasping like each breath might be her last. Between sobs, she forced out her tale in broken words. She spoke of a farmhouse sitting low on a hill, its windows boarded tight so no soul could peer in. Inside, the rooms was locked from the outside. She said there was girls in them rooms, girls who no longer cried, no longer begged, their voices spent or their spirits broken. And she said the ones holding those keys was William and Ray Collinsworth, brothers, one steady and mean, the other gone half mad. Her voice cracked to a whisper when she begged him with her torn hands clutching his sleeve, not to let him take her back there. The lantern flickered, shadows crawled long across the creek bed, and in that moment the miller swore the whole valley went quiet, like even the night itself was listening to her words. Word traveled fast through them hills, quick as sparks jumping off a blacksmith's forge. By the time midnight come down heavy, a dozen men had gathered at the crossroads, lanterns swaying in the wind, rifles gripped tight in their calloused hands. They weren't boys out for a fright. These was fathers, brothers, men with dirt under their nails and fear in their eyes. At the head stood Everitt Daniels, a farmer built broad from years behind a plow. His jaw was set hard as iron, for his own kin had gone missing, vanished like smoke in the wind. He told the men plain. He wouldn't turn back, not till he laid eyes on what was hid inside that Collinsworth place. Come what may, he'd see it through. They started down the road in a line, boots hitting the dirt like a funeral march. Above them, the moon slipped behind a thin quilt of clouds, leaving the world in a dim, sickly glow. Every dog they brought along tucked tail and pulled against their ropes, teeth bared, throats rumbling with low growls like they knew something the men didn't dare say out loud. Even the preacher, a stern man with fire in his sermons and thunder in his voice, kept flicking his eyes to the tree line. He held his Bible tight to his chest, but his gaze kept darting to the shadows that leaned long across the path, as if he feared they might start moving of their own accord. The Collinsworth farmhouse didn't stand proud like most homes. It crouched low against the earth, sagging like it knew the evil it held inside. The boards were warped from years of rot, nail heads catching the lantern light, so they winked like watching eyes. From the chimney poured a smoke that smelled sweet. Too sweet, wrong somehow, like something burning that weren't wood at all. At the back, they found a door, but it weren't no normal door. A heavy iron chain was looped through the latch, padlocked tight from the outside, like it weren't meant to keep folks out, but to keep something in. They pushed on. Inside, the air was thick as syrup, clinging to their throats. A single lamp burned low, casting a weak yellow glow that made the shadows dance like they was alive. From the rafters, a rope swayed slow and lazy, though there weren't a draft to move it. On the floor below, black stains spread wide, stains the lamplight couldn't scrub clean, no matter how it flickered. The hall stretched narrow and mean, its boards groaning under the men's boots. Halfway down, they saw it, a door scarred near through, gouged and clawed till the wood was shredded. The marks weren't random. They were crescents, layered atop one another, like desperate hands had clawed and clawed until fingernails split clean off. The men's eyes met in that sick glow. Their faces were pale, but their jaws stayed set. With one last nod, rifles raised, they pressed forward and shoved through the door. Inside that dim room, the brothers were already waiting like shadows that knew company was coming. William stood tall, his smile stretched thin and mean, like a man who took pleasure in holding secrets darker than night. His eyes never blinked, cold as river stone. Beside him, Ray twitched and shifted, his gaze flitting wild as minnows in a jar, never landing long enough to look human. Everitt Daniels raised his lamp high, and what the light revealed near froze the men in place. Chains bolted straight into the floorboards. A heavy chair rigged with cracked leather straps, stiff with stains that hadn't had time to dry. The walls breathed with shadows, and the smell of copper and sweat hung thick in the air. Ray's hand darted sudden, quicker than a snake strike, grabbing for a pistol half hid beneath the table. The room exploded in fire and thunder. Shots cracked sharp, the old boards shuddering with each blast. Smoke rolled out thick and gray, stinging the men's eyes till they was blind and coughing. When the din eased, William lay sprawled in the corner, his grin finally gone, eyes glassed over. Ray let out a shriek, high, broken, nothing human in it, and bolted for the back like the devil himself was nipping at his heels. His feet pounded the boards, disappearing into the dark, the sound trailing off into madness. Everitt Daniels clutched his side, blood seeping hot between his fingers. But he stayed on his feet, wounded, swaying. He stood long enough to bear witness, long enough to carry the tale of what was truly hid inside the Collinsworth house. They come to the cellar door last, a squat piece of wood sunk into the floor like it was trying to hide its own shame. It took 3 men leaning shoulder to shoulder to pry the hinges loose. When it finally gave, the door creaked open with a groan that sounded near human. The smell rolled out first, damp earth laced with iron, sweet rot that clung to the back of the throat. The lantern light trembled as they lowered it down, and what it showed ain't the kind of thing a man can carry easy in his memory. Along the walls were shelves, but they weren't lined with beans nor peaches nor any food put up for winter. No, them jars held things pale and twisted, floating in cloudy liquid, shapes that still bore the hint of what they once was. Fingers, eyes, bits of faces pressed against glass. In the corner slumped a burlap sack, tied shut but bulging heavy. One man kicked it open with his boot, and the weight that spilled out hit the dirt with a sound too soft and too human. The lantern flame bent low, catching on pale skin and hair matted dark. No one spoke. The dirt floor was scarred with grooves, deep tracks where heels had been dragged over and over, fighting to hold ground against a fate that wouldn't let go. They say it was then the preacher dropped his Bible. He stood there with his mouth hanging open, eyes wide and empty. Not a sound came out of him, like a man who'd prayed too long into the dark and finally realized there weren't no God left listening on the other side. By the time the rooster crowed and the first gray light broke over them hills, the sheriff's men finally showed, late, like the law most always is when it's needed most. What they found weren't fit for daylight. 4 bodies was carried out whole, stiff and cold. The rest come out in burlap and pieces no man nor woman would rightly claim. Folks turned their eyes away, some crossing themselves, others cursing under their breath. The house itself didn't last a week. Neighbors gathered, and with axes and hammers they tore it down board by board, not saving a nail nor a hinge. Some say they heaped the wreckage into a pile and set it to burn, flames lapping high enough to paint the sky. They wanted to be sure that no devil nor the memory of one could ever roost in them timbers again. As for Everitt Daniels, he carried that bullet wound till his dying day. Left him with a hitch in his step and a hollowness in his eyes, but he lived. Lived to sit on his porch and watch the sun set. Lived to tell what he saw that night when no one else dared. Folks remembered him for that. The man who looked straight through the Collinsworth door and came back to tell the tale. Now the farmhouse itself is gone, torn down to splinters long ago. But Blaine Creek still runs black and glassy through them hills, holding tight to every memory it ever saw. On quiet nights, folks who wander near Fallsburg swear they hear it. The scrape of chains dragging over stone, faint but steady, like something still bound down there in the dark. Others say they catch the glow of lamplight dancing where no window stands, a sickly yellow shine hovering in the mist, blinking out the second you look too long. Some whisper that William's still keeping watch, eyes cold and hard as river ice, staring from the shadows with that same cruel smile. Others say Ray ain't never stopped twitching, laughing in the wind, flitting just beyond the tree line where the branches don't quite sit still. And if you linger too long by that water, if you let the night settle into your bones, you just might hear it. A girl's breath, ragged and desperate, gasping fast as she claws for the bank, still trying to escape what waits behind her. That's why folks here don't call it just a tale. They say the hills remember, and worse than that, the hills don't forgive. So what do y'all reckon? Was this the truth of a wicked house hid in them hills, or just the kind of tale folks weave when the real truth's too heavy to carry? If you grew up hearing the Collinsworth story, I want to know. Who laid it on you first? Papa rocking on the porch? A mill hand whispering by the creek? Drop your piece of the legend down in the comments, 'cause these stories don't truly live till we share 'em. If this one left you hearing chains dragging in the wind, do us a kindness. Tap that subscribe and keep close to the fire. Backwoods believers, I thank you for holding this lantern with me tonight. Till next time, don't follow strange lights and don't ever trust a door that's locked tight from the outside.